So, today we're going to dive into a really fascinating methodology called Living Embodied Presence, or LEP for short. Now, this is specifically designed for people in those high-stakes roles. The founders, the creators, the leaders, anyone who knows deep down that what's happening inside their own mind has a direct, and I mean direct, impact on the results they get in the real world. And let's just get right to it with a pretty pointed question. If you're out there building something, trying to create something new, you've probably had this feeling, right? That nagging sense that your own stress, maybe your own hidden biases, or just plain old burnout might actually be the single biggest thing holding you back. So you have to ask yourself, is my inner world secretly undermining the very success I'm working so hard to create? And this leads us to a really foundational idea, especially if you're in a role with a ton of autonomy. And that idea is this: the practitioner is the system. You are literally the source code for your company, for your project, for your team. It all starts with you. Okay, so if you're the system, what happens when the system has bugs? Well, here's the consequence. When your inner world is fragmented, you're being pulled in a dozen different directions by stress, by beliefs you haven't even looked at, by emotional reactions, that fragmentation, it doesn't just stay inside your head. Oh no, it leaks out. It shows up everywhere as misaligned decisions, chaotic strategies, and totally unsustainable ways of working that, you guessed it, leads straight to burnout. And this right here, this is really what's at stake. Look at the left side. Inner fragmentation. That's what gives you reactive, emotionally driven decisions and just fries your nervous system. But when you start to actually cultivate inner coherence, look to the right, you get adaptive strategy, you get real ethical clarity, and you get sustainable action. And let's be clear, that difference isn't just some fluffy feeling. It is a hard, tangible business outcome. So if inner fragmentation is the bug in the system, what's the fix? Well, this is where living embodied presence comes into the picture. And this isn't just another wellness trend, okay? It's a structured, almost scientifically oriented approach. The best way to think about it is like you're installing a brand new, much more coherent operating system for your own mind. So to get a little more specific, LEP is what you'd call a first-person research methodology. What does that mean? It means you are the scientist, and your own direct experience is the laboratory. The whole goal here is to develop your own consciousness in a really systematic way that bridges that gap between your inner state of calm and clarity and your effectiveness out in the world. And this quote from the source material just hits the nail on the head. It says, "Inner development is not a soft add-on, but core operational infrastructure." This completely reframes the conversation, doesn't it? This stuff isn't a luxury. It's not a soft skill. It is core infrastructure. It's just as critical as your financial plan or your tech stack. Your inner state is a fundamental asset, or if you neglect it, a massive liability. Okay, so how does this methodology actually work on the ground? Well, LEP gives you 3 different lenses to conduct this inner research, and we can think of them really simply as investigating the what, the how, and the who of your own experience. The first lens, the starting point, is phenomenology. This is the what. It's all about the fundamental practice of paying really precise attention to your direct experience. The raw data of your sensations, your emotions, your thoughts, just as they're happening. The trick is to do it without immediately slapping a label on them or telling a story about them. For a leader, man, this skill is absolutely invaluable. It's what builds the stable nervous system you need to navigate chaos without just reacting on impulse. Next up, we have epistemology. This is the how. So once you can clearly see what's happening inside you, you start to investigate how you're making sense of it all. This is like debugging your own mental code. You're literally looking for the hidden assumptions, the biases, the projections that are coloring all of your decisions. And when you do this, your intuition stops being some kind of mystical guess, and it starts to become a highly trained, reliable capacity for pattern recognition. And the third and deepest lens is ontology, the who. Now, this is more of a long-term inquiry, and what happens here is your very sense of self begins to shift. You start to see that you aren't some static, fixed thing that's totally fused to your job title or your last win or your last failure. Instead, you start to experience yourself as a dynamic, unfolding process. And this creates a profound kind of stability because your core sense of self is no longer on the chopping block with every single project outcome. So you've got these 3 lenses, but they're all powered by a core engine of growth. This isn't just a static model where you learn a few things. It's a dynamic repeating cycle that actually drives real developmental change. And that engine is something called the subject-object shift. Now, I love this analogy.
Imagine you are completely lost in a virtual reality game. The game world is your reality. You're totally identified with it. The subject-object shift is that incredible moment where you suddenly realize, wait a minute, I'm wearing a headset. The game doesn't just vanish, but you're no longer lost inside it. You can now see the game for what it is, an object that you are aware of.
This whole process happens in 4 steps, and it just keeps repeating. First, you identify an assumption that you are completely living inside of, something that's so deep you don't even see it as an assumption. It's just the way things are. Then, you learn to see it from the outside. You make it an object you can look at. From there, you integrate this new, wider perspective into your worldview. And finally, you emerge from the process operating from a totally new, more coherent foundation. And the cycle begins again with the next unseen assumption. This is literally how your awareness grows up. All right, I know this can sound a bit abstract and profound, but what's the bottom line? What's the actual payoff here? Let's connect all these ideas back to the concrete, real-world benefits for your work and your life.
When you practice this methodology, you develop very tangible capacities. We're talking about a trustworthy intuition that's actually built on refined pattern recognition, not just wishful thinking. We're talking about real nervous system stability, so you can handle intense pressure without cracking. Sustained creative output, not just these random bursts of inspiration. You get the ethical clarity to make those really hard choices, and the adaptive intelligence to thrive when things get complex and unpredictable. To put it simply, you reduce the inner fragmentation that creates all that outer chaos.
And I think this quote just summarizes the entire journey so beautifully. What starts as just a hypothesis, an idea, like maybe I can be less reactive, is tested until it stabilizes into a ground of truth for you. What starts as a clunky, deliberate practice eventually consolidates and becomes an effortless, embodied part of your identity. And what starts as a fleeting insight matures into the very organizing principle of your being, the lens through which you see everything. And so we'll end with this question for you to take with you. We tend to think of our tools as external things, right? Our software, our strategies, our funding. But just imagine, what could you build if your own awareness was your sharpest, most precise, and most adaptive tool? What kind of problems could you solve? What kind of impact could you have if your own consciousness was the most well-honed instrument in your entire tool?